it's not on. Okay. All right, we're still in Daniel. And as I said before, Daniel chapter 10 is just kind of an introduction. Daniel's just telling us what was happening before. He doesn't give us the vision in this chapter. He's just telling us how it come about. So, but there's some interesting things, and I thought about kind of just skimming through this, but there are a few interesting things in it. I shouldn't say it like that. The Word of God is powerful. But there's a lot of things in here that we can learn. So we're in verse 4, chapter 10. It says, in the 24th day of the first month, I was by the side of the river, which is Hiddekel. Then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Okay, first of all, right off the bat, what can we glean from these first few words? In the 4th and 20th day of the first month. What does this tell us? Well, it gives us a time frame. This time frame closely corresponds with a certain set of feast days. First month corresponds with Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the Feast of First Fruits. So what this is during the period of time that these feasts would be taking place. These first three feasts would be taking place, which is interesting. I think that's the reason that the Holy Spirit always, when He puts a time and a date in there, He has something just to tell you. You have to sometimes be aware of it, but it's telling us something there. Passover begins on the 14th day of the first month, and then unleavened bread lasts till the 21st day. Now notice it says this is the 24th day. So Passover and unleavened bread would have been over. You know, it appears that Daniel had his prayer time this 21 days. It appears that he has it during these feast days. In fact, the matter is, just you supposing that maybe he could have started on the first day of the first month and went through the 21 days until the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then we have 3 days after that he gets a bit, that he has his vision. We don't know. In fact, the matter is, it says the 24th day, but we don't know whether he concluded his prayers exactly at the end of the feast days or before the end of the feast days. But we know from the description that it's taking place in the first month of
Raymond, do you think this was in a dream?
No, the reason being is he clearly tells us it's a vision.
But what do you see in vision? What do you see of vision as this character was?
You want to know the difference between a vision and a dream?
Just in the air, you just see it in the air,
Oh, actually, he's awake. He's awake at one point on this river. He's there awake. He's with some other guys.
Right.
They're there on the river, and he says all of a sudden this certain man appears to him. Now at one point he falls into a deep sleep, and then in a little bit another one comes along. The angel comes and raises him up. But the actual vision, the actual communication that's going on is actually having a vision. All of a sudden, it's, there's the appearance of this certain man. Well, I've never had one.
I've never had one. I've had a lot of dreams.
I've had a lot of dreams, and I have some weird dreams. They say old men dream dreams, and I have some weird dreams. And I've always lost something. I'm trying to find something. Either I've lost my truck, I can't find my truck, or I've lost something else, and it's just, I go through, I guess that's the reason sometimes I don't rest very good, because I'm hunting for something all night, But anyway, I never had a vision. But the difference is between a dream and a vision is that all of a sudden you get a vision of something,
They say that that's how God communicated with the Indians through the visions. How they knew their, vision through visions.
Yeah.
You've heard that the young warriors have to go out and have their vision.
Build a barn.
Yeah, I guess. I do know that even today, I do know that Christ is appearing to people in some of the Islamic nations. He just shows up. And they say, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Jesus." And they get converted that way. It's, I guess if God can't get to you one way, He will do all in His power to get to you another way. That's how, I heard a guy say something today that I didn't agree with. Maybe you heard him, I won't call his name because he's a good preacher, but he just said something I didn't agree. He said that God loved us because Jesus died for us. It's the reason God loved us. But the Bible doesn't say it like that. The Bible says He loved us and He sent Jesus to die for us. He doesn't love us because Jesus died for it. He didn't fall in love with us after Jesus died for us because Jesus died for us. He loved us before that. And I just made note of that. And I know we all sometimes, I don't care who we are, sometimes we make statements that we don't give a lot of thought to, but He made, so how did I get on that? I don't know. Well, yeah, you got me off track, didn't you? Okay, never mind. All right, it's the 24th day of the first month. And the first month, you go to Exodus 12, we're going by God's calendar, the way God sets up things. And so if you go to Exodus 12, you see where He told them that the month Abib would be the first month to them. We're talking about the religious calendar now. The first Abib. After the captivity in Babylon, they began to call Abib the month Nisan. After that period of time, so that's and that become that's the first month. This event would correspond. We're talking about Passover and the season of Passover and first fruits and unleavened bread correspond with our March and April. So right after, in fact, the matter is right after the spring equinox. Sometimes right after that, you'll start having Passover. Now, because of the Jewish calendar being on a lunar calendar ever so often, in fact, 7 times out of 19 years, they have to add an extra month. And so, in order to get the spring equinox back in line so that Passover will fall at the right time. So they'll add an extra month every so often. Okay, let me get back to the lesson. Said I was by the side of the great river, which is the Hiddekel, which is what we call today the Tigris River, you know. So it brings up a question really concerning he's by the Tigris River. We don't wonder where. I mean, he may be back. I don't know exactly where he is right now, because if I remember correctly, the Tigris does not run through Susa, you know. It runs out of Turkey and runs through Iraq today. So I don't know exactly, except he's by that river. It could be back, it could be anywhere. Now, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, they run kind of parallel with each other. They come within 35 miles of each other, about that distance north of Babylon. And then I think that's the closest they come until they get down to Basra, where they join together. Were you in Iraq? I think that's right. Around Basra, they join back together. But anyway, the river runs about 1,150 miles to the south out of eastern Turkey, mountains up there. And then they, as I said, they joined together at Basra. That's what Mesopotamia means. It means two rivers. And that's where the name comes from. Daniel was an official in the Persian government at this time, and I guess he didn't go back. He didn't go back with the Ezra and all of them that went back when Cyrus said, you know, you can go back and build a temple. Of course, he's 85 years old, you know. And I'm sure that Daniel figured it. This point, I think he's 85. He's somewhere around 85, maybe a little bit more than 85 years old, you know. And he may have figured that, you know, no use in me going back at this age, you know. And he had a pretty good position, a real good position in the Persian government. See, God has seen to that. And you see the blue, the dark blue, that's the route of the Tigris River. And the thin line over here, that's the Euphrates. I was on the Euphrates right where it comes out of Syria there. That's where I spent some time, just before it went into Iraq. You know. But anyway, leave that to rest. He says, then I lifted up my eyes and looked. Back to this. He's not having a dream. He's having a vision. And he's accompanied by some men. Now, who are these men? It doesn't tell us. They could have been prayer partners, maybe. Or they could have been government officials that was with him. We just don't know, but he had some people with him, you know, there. And he said, and it says, and behold, a certain man. Now, who is this? It said, behold, a certain man. This is the first one that he sees in this vision. And I think it's worthwhile to ask the question, who do we think it is? Well, we read the description, and we know this has been a debate for centuries as to who this guy is. But I'm going to inject something here that I think is a plausible explanation, not because I come up with it, but because John Walbert suggested it, and I think it's but considering the debate has to do, is this an angel? I might ask you, you think it's an angel? Or is it a theophany? God appearing to man. You know, it's got to be one or the other. It's going to be an angel, or it's going to be a theophany. You know, those who argue that it's an angel, they point to verse 13, which is a legitimate argument from the point that it has to be an angel, because in verse 13 he said, "But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief priests, came to help me, and I remained there with the king of Persia." So here's his argument. It makes good sense that God wouldn't need an angel to come and help him if he was confronted with some hierarchy of evil spirits, you know, or an evil spirit. So that's a good argument. Then those that argue that it's a theophany or either a Christophany, which would be Christ, they point to Revelation chapter 1, where we get a description of the glorified Christ. Now, what we read here in Daniel in chapter 10, a description of that person pretty well corresponds with what it says, describes Christ in Revelation chapter 1. Let's just do a comparison here. The middle column being in Daniel, and of course the one on the right in Revelation. In appearance, we have a certain man. In Revelation, we have like the Son of Man. And in clothing, there's a couple categories of clothing here. In Daniel, it says he was clothed in linen. In Revelation, it said clothed with a garment. It also said girded with gold of Uphaz. And then in Revelation, it said girded with a gold band. And then his face, it says face like the appearance of lightning in Daniel. And in Revelation, it says his head and hair was white like the wool, as white as snow. And then it said, talking about his eyes, it said in Daniel, his eyes were like torches of fire. And then in Revelation, his eyes were like a flame of fire. And then his arms and feet. In Daniel, it says his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color. And then in Revelation, it says his feet were like fine brass, as refined in a furnace. And then the very last thing, considering the voice, it says in Daniel, his voice like the voice of a multitude. In Revelation, it says his voice as the sound of many waters. So you see, there's kind of a parallel there. So those that say, well, it's a theophany because it's the same. But you still have the problem with verse 13, because God wouldn't need any help going against Christ wouldn't need any help, going against the angel. And we're told clearly in verse 13 that was a problem, that the demonic force in Persia was preventing him from bringing the message. Defending the opinion that it's a theophany, John Walvoord gives us distinguishes between the person that we're seeing here and the person that we're seeing a little later in the chapter. He says, okay, these are not the same, which to me is a logical explanation. And I'll show you why in just a little bit. But the person in Daniel 10, verse 5 and 6 is a different person than the angel that is shown in verse, that comes on the scene in verse 10 through 14. And here's what Walvoord says. Although there is room for debate, even among conservative scholars, the evidence seems more in favor of considering this a theophany. In this case, the man of 10, 5, and 6 is to be distinguished from the angel of 10, 10 through 14, as well as Michael, of course, he's being never mentioned in verse 13. Although mighty angels are frequently difficult to distinguish from God himself, as in other versions, such as those described in Ezekiel and Revelation, the similarity between the man described in verses 5 and 6 and the glorified Christ in Revelation 1, 13 through 15 has led conservative expositioners such as Young and Keel to consider the man a genuine theophany as or an appearance of Christ as the angel of Jehovah. So what he's suggesting here is that we have two different personalities, two different that shows up. I got to looking at it, and I think that's a logical explanation. See one in the beginning, and then another a little bit later, and I'll show you that maybe word transitions take place. I'm sorry.
It says he was left alone in verse 8. And another hand touched him later.
Right.
It says.
Right. So there's a break. If you just look, there is a break there. In fact, the matter is, he falls into a deep sleep.
It's just funny that they argue over silly things.
Yeah, it doesn't mean a whole. I mean, in the overall picture, it doesn't mean anything. That's right. Yeah. But it's just a time. In fact, you go back to Abraham. You know, when the three men showed up. You know, and they discussed with Abraham stuff. He killed a kid and had lunch and then they said, well, you know, we need to tell Abraham what we're about. So they told him about going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and so forth and so on. But if you read that in there, one of those was the Lord. Was El Shaddai. It was one of them was Jehovah or Yahweh, whatever you want. One of them was God that appeared there. So, anyway, verse 7 says, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. So he's the only one that sees it. For the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Therefore I was left alone and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me, for my comeliness was turned in me into corruption, and I retained no strength. Yet heard I the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground. But we see, okay, what happens? He sees this manifestation of this certain man. That's what he called a certain man. And all of a sudden, he's so tremendously affected by it, that he is on his face and he falls into a deep sleep. I don't know whether I'm getting ahead of myself, but he's the only one that sees this vision. This is kind of like Paul. The guys that were with Paul, they heard a voice, but they didn't see anything. But Paul saw something else. It's kind of like that. Also, you remember back in Samuel, I think the first Samuel somewhere. You remember where Jonathan and his armor bearer, they're going against the Philistines, and they're at Michmash. Philistines, Michmash is up on the top of a hill or bluff. It was hard to get to, but it's easily defended. And so Jonathan just tells his armor bearer, "Let's go and see what we can do." And so they go, just those two, they take off and they go, and the Bible says something about them passing between two sharp rocks, and and they find a path that goes up and comes up in a kind of an unbeknownst way to the village up there, and they come out on a field. It's about, well, it's described like it's about the size that an oxen could plow in a day, you know. And they see about, I think they kill about 20 people or something, 20 guys there in this field, that, you know. But anyway, they actually rout and the Philistines get to fighting among themselves and killing each other. I mean, you know, and they win the battle. You know. Well, how many of you read the story about the British officer that when they were in you know, back in World War I, and they were in Israel, and the Turks had occupied the Mi'kmaq. They were up on that bluff, that very same bluff, the Turks were. And one young officer, Mi'kmaq just kind of registered with him. And he got his Bible down by candlelight and began to go through his Bible trying to find Mi'kmaq, because he knew something was, you know, about that was stirring, that he remembered something about. And he found the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer going up. So he goes and shows that to his commanding officer. And so they assign a detail to go out and see if they can find those two sharp rocks where that path goes up. And they find it. And they end up going up that way and end up routing the Turks there and winning that battle. It's the same way, you know. Well, getting back to what I was going to say, the same word that is used where it talks about these guys being at they didn't see anything, they didn't hear anything, but they were terrified. And it uses the same word when about the Philistines there on Mi'kmaq, is what they become very terrified, and God give Jonathan the victory, you know. So something strange was going on here. They didn't see anything, they didn't hear anything, but evidently it was the very presence of this certain man, even though they couldn't see him, or they didn't hear his words, and we don't, and Daniel doesn't actually tell us anything about what his words were. He just said, I heard his words, you know. But there was something, the presence of the Almighty caused them to be terrified, and they run and hid, you know. And I got to thinking about that. How many times have you been in services where you could feel the presence of God?
Absolutely.
I mean, you know.
Absolutely.
And if he hadn't cut it down, I mean, you know, if you hadn't got it at a lower level, you know, it might have been something that would terrify you and you'd have to run and hide, you know. But God shows up. I know we sing a song sometime that says, God show up, you know, God show up. How much of God do we want to show up? Because, you know, but that's what was happening here. These guys, they run and hid, overcome by fear. Okay. And then he says how it affected him. He said, there is no strength left in me. I heard a testimony of a guy one time said he'd seen people slain on the street. He said, that'll never happen to me. Of course, that's something you just don't want to say. Because if you say it's not going to happen to me, you got to make sure it happens to you, just to show you in charge, I guess. I want, but that was exactly what happened. You know, he in a service one day, and all of a sudden, next thing he knew, he was out. He was slain in the spirit, you know. And, you know, there's something special about that too, when God puts you down, you know, and brings you. But he said, there remain no strength in me. The appearance of this certain man just took everything out of him, and he fell to the floor. He said, my comeliness was turned into corruption. And I'm sure that I don't care who you are. I don't care how good you think you are, or how good you think you've lived, or how good you think that stand there, come up into the presence of God, and you realize, all my righteousness is this filthy rag. So he saw his own corruption. The Hebrew word for the comeliness is the word, I guess you'd say it, hope, odd. But anyway, it means splendor, majesty, and vigor. In other words, all that just disappeared. All his splendor, all his vigor, all his majesty, it just, went to nothing. Isaiah had the same situation. Remember this? Isaiah chapter 6, verse 5, he says, when he saw the Lord high and lifted up, he said, then said I, woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King. I guess I'm trying to get us to get a vision of the King, to see how magnificent the King is in comparison with what we are and everything. And we have to realize that. We have to realize what we are that really counts is what we are in Him.
That's right. Yeah.
What we are in Him. He's our life. And so, let me see where we're at. And when I heard these words, I fell into a deep sleep. Now, the next scene is this right here. When he's touched, but now he falls asleep. That could be the period where the transition takes place. Right? The Lord could have appeared to him in the first there. It could have been a manifestation of the Son of God. It could have appeared to him there. And then, he fell asleep, and then an angel come along and wakes him up. Okay, I'll stop. I quit. God bless you.
Good.